at this stage, and I mean at this stage, maybe this, week or two, that they're less likely to be digging in and chasing those people because they're making a start. So from our feedback from us as a housing association, we've had a guy from the HSE come round to us. He wanted to have a look on site. He wanted to see a few things. And really it was to see where we were. Two things really, partially to see where we were and how well we were moving. And also I believe, I didn't speak to him much, but I believe for them to gauge what they're doing was how well it was being received. They were sending things out, but did we understand it? And part of the process why we said to them, come along, talk to us, was because we knew that if we were engaging with them and showing them how far we'd come and what we were doing and how proactive we were, they were less likely to hassle us in the future. Because basically they go, we're making friends. We're making friends. We're not in any conflict with you. We're doing well. They'll go, great. As you say, you've got a few things in folders already. That's, you're making works happening on site. We're changing cladding. Cladding's coming off, cladding's going back on it. We've done one building, we're moving on to a next. It's happening. And if I was the HSE, I'd go, THCH, don't need to worry about them. They've got it in hand. Let's concentrate our efforts on those that are going, nah, you don't need to do this, or I'll do it next year, or we haven't got the budget. They're the people they're going to hassle. So in one sense, those people who are making an effort, they're not going to be hassling. They're going, are you on track? Are you doing what you expected to do? Good. Move on. We'll concentrate on other people. However, at the same time, while we're doing stuff, one of my colleagues in a different housing association had produced quite a good safety case. They'd gone right through to actually producing safety cases and had sent them in 3 or 4 times. And a bit like the old-fashioned planning process in the same sort of way, but building safety, you send something in, they tell you it's wrong, won't tell you how to fix it, but just tell you it's wrong, might give you some guidance into which direction it is, and send it back, and then they'd make those changes, and then they'd send it in again, and then they go, no, that's still not quite what we meant, and then send them out and then send them in again. So on one side of things, you've got, you're doing fine, and on the other side of things, they were going, no, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Because they wouldn't give guidance. If you ask these people to come in and say, can you tell us how to do it? They're not going to tell us. They're going to say, you come up with the design. It has to be suitable for your building. We'll tell you what's wrong with it, but we won't necessarily tell you how to do it. And so, yes, they are after, at the same time as they want people vaguely in the right direction. But when you are doing the final delivery, they are expecting. And of course, they're learning. So I'm sure what's happening is stuff is coming in from one housing association and they go, oh, look, there's 10 things on there. We never thought about those. They'll say, that sounds about right. And then someone else will send something else in and they'll mention something and they go, oh, look at what this bloke's talked about. We never thought about that. We better tell these people to do it too. That goes back, that comes back. And meanwhile, there's more information coming in and they're sort of picking the best of them all and going, oh, no, you haven't done this. So until we all learn from each other, we're never going to, there's always going to be something better to be done. But the biggest thing is that, and you say BIM, I mean, I think it's because people use the word digital, which is basically everything's digital nowadays. All that digital means now is not on paper. That's all they mean, is just don't send me pieces of paper. The only places you're going to get pieces of paper is in your PIB box, your SIB box on site. Apart from that, it's digital. So digital could just mean a pile of PDFs. In theory. So when you're talking about info to the fire brigade for the Fire Safety Act, for instance, they just want PDFs because literally they're going to be reading them on the screen as if it's a piece of paper. So that's them done. Whereas the building safety case, it depends on the building, doesn't it? And some buildings will need far more complication. And if you can deliver it in a way that's clear and understandable, and we have a requirement to make it easily to be understandable, and in theory we should be able to share this with residents to say, look, this is how your building works, and it's understandable to them without too much detail, then the front picture of it should be nice and clear and easy. But the HSE will go, prove that bit, and that's where the underlying information needs to be explained in detail to prove why you've got that headline thing that we are safe because. And they say, well, tell us about the because. And well, we're doing this. Well, how do you know that's right? And where is it? And who's got the qualifications? And who's said that, yeah, that fire stopping device is actually in the right wall. It's no good having a lovely device if the wall's no good, or if it's not suitable for the wall, or there's holes round it, you know. Who signed that off, and is it right? And that's where your detail comes in. And I think they don't want to restrict anyone's method.
No, that's
so they
true.
won't say
That's
you must do it this way, because someone will go, but I've got this brilliant idea and you're telling me I can't use it, because they want to allow us to come up with our own ideas that work for us, and that's fair.
I think when you're doing new build, Andrew, a lot of it will be bearing in mind there's layer upon layer of information. If you're building from scratch, the method, and you remember this, George, we had about interoperability. In other words, from a manufacturer's point of view, we don't want to have to produce data in many, many different formats for many, many different people. We want we want to be able to have a piece of data that can be used by many users. And I think to some degree, the storage and recording of the building safety case and the golden thread will be to some degree dictated by the contractors and how they choose to require you to present them with the information that they deem is necessary. And BIM is going to be a good way of doing that. I have to say, a lot of the emphasis in the building safety regulator from housing association and builders owners perspectives with, have you registered your buildings? You have until such and such a time to do them. Are they all registered? Do you know how to do it? This is how you do it. And they ran 3 or 4 separate workshops on how to register the building and what information you had to log with the building safety regulator, which is not really anything to do with BIM as such.
No, it's the overview, isn't it?
It's the overview, but I think you're probably right, Andrew. There are those at the moment that will take their file full of manila folder full of papers through the scanner and send them off, and hey presto, they're digital. But in the medium to long term, that ain't going to wash in my opinion, because you know you've got so many, and they're beginning to get systems thinking now as well, thinking about how things work in conjunction with other products. Because, for example, you made a point there, a cavity barrier might only work or have certification in a particular type of wall. So you have to put the product into its context, or a set of hinges in a fire door, or a door handles and all of that stuff. And that's quite complicated and complex to work out. And that's where I think BIM has got a significant part to play. But I think that it wouldn't be the world's worst idea, George, to maybe ask if the HSE would kind of give us their view on where BIM sits with them. I think they might just say, well, digital is digital, but they must have an opinion. They must have a view.
Well, the view I've heard so far is you don't have, legally, it doesn't have to be BIM. It can be, scanned in plans, if that's as simple as the building is, but as it gets more complicated, then BIM will be needed because of the complication. So,
and the data storage requirement, and the size of the data, and the size of the data banks, and where the hell are you going to keep all of this stuff? Bearing in mind, it's going forward, it's a significant amount of data to kind of to keep track of.
And you need to be able to keep it up to date.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly right.
It's an ongoing thing, not just the one-off. Yeah, exactly. We've got a great classic, which is that as we are recladding our buildings, we're using Multivista to go around taking photographs of the deconstruction of the wall, the reconstruction of the wall across multiple points across the whole building as we take those walls off and on again. And in fact, there's probably more photographs than a new build, because we're taking photographs of it coming off and going back on again, whereas a new build, it would only go back on. That is a photograph per week per, I don't know, window maybe, or an area around, an area around a wall. So the number of photographs, the number of data points, the data of who, what, where and when was fitted on that small area of wall is huge. We've got a window, a reveal, a cavity barrier, a bit of insulation, the membrane behind that, the insulation, the other cavity barrier, the horizontal carrier barrier, the vertical carrier. That's all within 1 foot of a bloody window. Never mind that multiplied across the whole building, and then that has to be stuffed somewhere. But most of it we'll never need. It will be there, and we will need it at some point. True. And we need to have all of it. But what it will do is it will mean that in the future, in 5 years' time, when I have to review the building safety case, I don't have to physically remove that wall to see what was behind it. I might need to do a random number, just as a special. But generally, I can go through the photograph saying, "Look, here it is being installed. Here it is that the cavity barrier. There's the make and model of the cavity barrier. Blah blah blah." But it's a huge amount of data. But it means physically, I won't need to find out later.
Yeah. See, the thing is, just picking up what Chris was saying there earlier. The term BIM is a challenging one, actually, because it's something that people can relate to, because it's a thing, but it also gets misinterpreted by people. So I mean, that's one of the reasons we've renamed the UK BIM Alliance NEMA, because which, to be frank, wasn't my choice. But the point is that we're trying to move it away from a 3D model to being about information. And therefore that's really what we're trying to get to. So one of the challenges I think that we've got, and your example of Multivista is a really good one, and that is that you've done that for a particular exercise, so you've got that as a data set that's accessible. So you could say that's one golden thread. If you have fire door inspections, you'll probably whoever's doing the inspection might be using Plan Radar, Bolster, Vision. There's a range of different applications that they will use. So therefore, you will get a link to Plan Radar. You'll have somebody else that is looking at maybe smoke ventilation or dampers. They'll use something else. So what that means is that although in theory you've got a golden thread for each of those things, it doesn't relate back to the same building, or sorry, the same part of the building. So you and therefore if then a change takes place because you do some renovation work and you update the drawings and the floor plan and all the rest of it, all of a sudden all that additional information, where was the original fire stopping, where's the new fire stopping, it's all in different data sets. So what we've been trying to do, I'm talking now, taking off my BIM4Housing hat for the minute and putting on my active plan hat, what we've been trying to do is make it so that can be glued together, so that you can actually see it in context. Now that's something that we've we do with hospitals, and that type of federation is something that I think is needed. And when I talk to people, they agree. So it's not a matter of you still want your fire door inspectors to be able to use the applications that they are familiar with. But it's a matter of what then happens with that data. Is it there? We're doing something at the moment with the council, and we've been given access to Oakleaf which did the fire risk assessment. And, you know, it's quite a comprehensive fire risk assessment, but how do you tie back the information about the various different things that they've put in that fire risk assessment against the building?
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and my view is for the building safety process, I think it does need to be glued together so you can say, right, as Chris was saying earlier, you've got a number of different asset types that need to work together to actually deliver the mitigation or whatever the HSE, and that was the brief that we had when we started, and it's this obviously this this claim argument evidence bit, isn't it? You know, so that's the way I've been following things through.
It's a very good point, George, and I hadn't quite seen it in that way, that actually there's this thing about putting information in one place, isn't it? It's that golden thread, a single version of truth. But actually, to enable that, you're quite right, there is sometimes a lot of data coming in inwards, and we're thinking, so far I've thought, yeah, the data comes in, it goes into one database, probably into another, and then goes into Multivista to record where it is. But when we're talking about updating data, I hadn't thought about it. It needs to go back out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, because if data comes in from one, you'll end up with what appears to be a contradiction. Yeah, you'll have data from one worker, yeah, who said, I've changed this bit. And you've got data from somewhere else who said, when I was there, I saw that.
Exactly.
And you need to make sure that the dates are in there so you know who was the most up to date. And in my experience, sometimes you get one person who's very recently been there, but has made an assumption.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas there's older data. So though it's older, it's not necessarily less relevant. If it's older, it might have been, but I was the man who installed it. I know exactly what date it was installed. Yeah. More recently, someone comes along and said, well, I've had a look at it and I reckon it was installed on this date. But actually, the person who actually installed it knows the actual date and the actual product. The person who's done the inspection is making an assumption or a guess. So which is right? And then, you know, which one takes precedent? And then, you know, does it feed back into the other databases that says this information is now actually more up to date? You need to record it here, because otherwise you're going to get, at some point, you're going to get someone saying it's blue, no, it's red, no, it's blue, no, it's red, as different if it comes in. If you don't feed it back out again, saying, no, we've changed that. It's not like that anymore. We've got rid of it. FRA stuff, the bloke does the inspection and quite quickly someone's out there maybe fixing it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's changed. It's new. There's a new bit of kit there. And how do we make sure all of them are right? Which is why they want the single point of truth. But equally, does that feedback outwards to the other databases so that they've got that information for the next round or whatever? You know, because
I mean, yeah. So the approach that we're taking with that is we've got a couple of different elements to it, and I was given an example yesterday by somebody that is doing fire engineering, and he was saying that a common problem is that the fire strategy plans and the fire compartmentation plans may not relate to the fire zoning.
Right.
Yeah. Which
for the fire alarm. Yeah.
Yeah, for the fire alarm. Yeah, because they've been done at different times by different people. And that obviously, I don't know if you've come across that, but he said that's not at all uncommon. He said when we go and put update the fire alarms or reconfigure, because obviously the fire alarms also need to reflect the use of the building as well.
Lines,
yeah, exactly. and you can very easily end up with those being out of step with each other. So and because they're different documents.
Yeah, and they can be for different reasons. So yeah, we had exactly that. Our office is quite open plan. And we asked someone else to check the fire alarm panel and zone it. And he said, well, according to this, it's all one big zone. It's all called zone 1 on this. Now, you know, there's the zoning as in how many circuits there are, you know,
Yes.
how many detectors are on one circuit going out and back again.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be divided by a compartmentation line.
Yeah.
Because mainly zoning is so that the fire brigade can go, oh, it's on the left of the building, the right of the building, upstairs, downstairs, or in that cupboard. They just need to know location. And of course, it's historic based on when we used to have the zones was the only location thing you'd have. It was, you know, something in zone 2 had gone off. But of course, now we have individually addressed items on the fire panel. In some ways, zoning is less relevant because you can tell exactly where it is. You know, it's the third cupboard on the left, and it's the heat detector, not the smoke detector. So they, you know, zones are just a very vague. It's over there. But you're right; they should really be along compartmentation lines. You know, that's a different compartment. Therefore, it should be in a different zone. But yes, we've got. For instance, we've got a set of plans where zone 1 will be the left of the building and it'll be 5 flats.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's many compartments on a flat, you know, many flats.
Yeah.
But it's just breaking the building up, and it doesn't really reflect the compartmentation lines at all.
Yeah. So the approach that we've taken with that is that when you bring a spatial model, because we're working with Multivista, by the way, Andrew. So we've got a project at the moment which they're just completing the first part of it with Origin Housing. So they've gone and scanned 5 buildings, and we've also been doing the same exercise with Murphy surveys, Clyman Craven, and spatial dimensions as well. So to try and break it up so that we can get some degree of understanding of how different people operate it. But yeah, they're capturing the photographs. They're cutting through and producing the floor plans for us. So we've got a 2D floor plan. But the important thing is that what we're also doing is tying back to that 2D floor plan 360 photos. Now, the 360 photos, when they come into Active Plan, you can then use the data libraries to tag them with the things that you can see. So it means that you can build up an asset list from the photography. Now, and you can do it in 2 ways. One is if you know that there is an AOV in that area, you can click on it and say that's where the AOV is, for example. But you can also, for example, if there's a cavity barrier there, you won't be able to see the cavity barrier, probably, but you can click on the photograph and identify that's where it is.
Right.
So
yeah, it's behind the wall and it's there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that helps. The point about that is that those 360 photographs, because those can be taken just using Ricoh £300 Ricoh cameras.
Yeah.
So it means that the local team can get those cameras and then use them to then go and update the information. So you can then have maybe annually, you could have a new 360 photo.
Yeah.
So that you can then see, you know, or you do it probably when anything changes. That's probably the easiest way of doing it.
Yeah.
So that becomes part of a workflow that then keeps everything up to date, and we can then take the fire zoning drawings and the fire zoning and the fire compartmentation information, and that then becomes part of the active plan. so that you can then see that in context. So that's where I'm going with this, to be able to hold all the documents in a proper structured metadata-based folder structure, and to be able to tie, for example, the fire risk assessment back to both the building and also break out of that. If there's a fire risk assessment against a particular flat, then it's tied back to that particular grouping of spaces that's the flat. And also to be able to interactively, you can make those changes. So that's where I'm going with it. Now, I'm just trying to get a sense check to see if that's really what people want and need, or whether we're just going over the top.
I think you're right. Overall, somehow we need, a digital version of what's on site, isn't it? It's how do we record what's actually on site? But more importantly, how do we know that they do stay in sync?
Yeah.
It's no good saying, well, the computer says it doesn't exist, when someone's standing there going, look, it's here in my hand.
Yeah.
It was always a joke I saw that in a wholesalers. There was a cartoon on the wall on the wholesalers, and the bloke, the customer standing there going like this, right, and the bloke on the computer was going, the salesman was saying, it's no good pointing at it, my computer says we haven't got one. It's like that. I want that. No, we haven't got any of them. We don't want that. We don't, it does need to be kept up to date, and that's what I'm saying. But sometimes we've got one person who's been there at a different time, who is the ultimate which is right, and that's quite tricky sometimes, because you've got someone guessing, and someone, because it's a survey, and someone who installed it who's got it right. Someone does a repair, and for some reason that repair process doesn't get through the system onto Active Plan or whatever, and update that data, because it gets missed. And then, well, according to us, the last time someone touched it was 6 years ago. Well, that's not true. The bloke was down here last week. How do you make sure everything? So for me, it will be talking to repairs and their subcontractors and saying, look, somehow we need to know about everything going on everywhere. Because one, we want to know it going in right, and others, and not getting irrelevant stuff coming through necessarily. We painted the wall inside someone's flat, and it's like, well, we don't need to know about that, but if you paint the wall in the stairwell, I do want to know about it, because what was the product? That's going to be a long thing of trying to keep it up to date.
Just to say, Chris has had to drop out because his camera's malfunctioning, and he's having trouble with Teams.
Okay.
Yeah, he started getting cut in half, didn't he? He looks a bit odd.
Yeah.
But it does sound right, and I'm intrigued as to it. It's a very good point. I'll have to think about that, about it going back out to other data. So the data it comes in from should be corrected and maybe sent out in several directions, maybe.
Well,
or we just ends up in one place. It's quite tricky, because, as you say, you've got people using their bespoke stuff, which they're allowed to use, and then it feeds in.
I mean, what I'd like to the proposition from my perspective is that because Active Plan's a cloud database and it works off SQL Server, so it can talk to anything, we can retain all of those individual files, but we federate them, so it becomes grouped together. And because we also use BIM4Housing as part of our solution. If it's a 3D model, then we can tie that together as well. So I think we've got a solution to that particular issue.
Well, most of them do, don't they? You had in Multivista and some of the other, as you say, like yourselves, where you've always got that history, so you just go back and back and back.
Yeah.
And you can see all versions of it, but you try and see the current version. Yeah. So for simplicity, you see the current version, but for historic data, you can go back and see what it used to be, and the photos that go with it, which is useful, isn't it? Where possible. So
yeah, but that each of these applications is designed for its particular purpose. So for example, the multi-vista, being able to track back every week, for example, through your things is fantastic. But if somebody's just looking to find out what that asset is in that room, they want a much simpler way of doing that.
Yeah, they don't need to know what it used to be, because it's gone. That's irrelevant.
Exactly.
They just want to know what it is now. Yeah,
and also to be able to tie it back to the information about the how it was inspected and who did it and all that sort of stuff. So my approach is to see if we can use that in a federated way. Now, obviously, feeding stuff back out again is an important area. So if, for example, a floor plan changes, then it's a matter of then identifying an alert to the whatever the application is, maybe the fire stopping application, that there's a revised floor plan. So
yeah,
that Bolster or something like that. Bolster, I've got a meeting with Bolster tomorrow, because they, like most people, they work off just a PDF. Now, in theory, that's great, but the PDF isn't it's just an image. So the pins that are on the PDF, the work that we're looking to do is to make it so that we can pick up the coordinates of those pins,
right,
and then we bring them back into the spatial model, so that you can actually see not just where the penetration seal pins are, but you can also see where information that might have come in from plan radar is as well.
Yeah.
So that all of the different locational information can then be federated. So you've got a proper, sort of, well, for want of a better term, a digital twin. That's reflecting that. Now that's the sort of thing that we're, and I'd be interested in having a session with you to just talk through what we're doing in that regard, to see if there's perhaps an opportunity with Tower Hamlets. I don't mean this in a sales way, but I'd like to see. I mean, your experience on that would be, because you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this and working through it, and I'd be interested to see if you think we're on the right track. We're doing the thing at the moment with Tower Hamlets Homes.
All right.
So there's been delays in us kicking that off because they wanted to get their Type 4 fire risk assessments done, but we've literally this week, the surveyors are going in and doing the point clouds on 3 of the blocks, and capturing the 360 photos. So we I can show you what we're doing there. But yeah, I think you've probably got all that. Have you got all your stuff in the premises information boxes now?
Yeah, mainly. Although I'm adding some of the newer stuff going into the premises information, but like I'm having to. I mean, we've got it. It's just not in the the sort of an elevation view or a floor by floor view. That even the floor plan. So all the floor plans have been done for many times, but putting things like the residents with peeps and things like that, so that we can get them out.
How many HRRBs have we got?
Depending how you count them, we're doing them as 11 blocks. So, and those 11 blocks on occasion are 2 or 3 buildings, but they are a building.
Yeah.
So if you drew the circumference around a block,
Yeah.
You know, it's sometimes four named stairwells, if you like.
Yeah.
But
sure.
actually, it's, you know, if you look at it from a building point of view, it's one building with 4 stairwells in it. So we've called that one. But when we list addresses, it's about 17 or something. But if we look at buildings as a whole building, then there's so we've got a couple of joined buildings of a 2 or 3 or 4. But that's sort of number. Not huge. Not huge. I'm quite. It's nice. It's a nice and manageable number of.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting blocks. Some of them are just concrete and brick tower blocks, so you know, relatively straightforward, and then you have to worry about the more recently built 15-year-old buildings that are the terrible ones. The really old buildings are fine. They're just brick and concrete, and we've got nice new fire doors in them, and there's not much wrong, you know. And most of it is passive, not active, you know, whereas the new buildings are all over the place.
So in terms of, so you're using Multivista, what other software are you using? Do you mind me asking?
So it's working with, who's the other guys who are sort of doing your role? Just had a week off and my brain's gone wrong. So mostly we're using the consultants we're using alongside us is Altair.
Oh yeah.
And Altair have worked with Multivista a lot, and they're also effectively one of their staff is embedded in us as a project manager anyway.
Yeah, that's the normal way they work, isn't it? I know Sean there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we've got Laurie Stroud, and he's so he's been running one of the cladding replacement programs. Let's have I'll tell you what I'll do. It would be quite good on a meeting. Who's in Alastair? Oh, this is this one. Let's go back to this calendar. It'll be up a bit. Yeah, for some reason I haven't got my brain in gear for the technical side. That's the wrong meeting. Too many meetings in one day. I'm clicking on the wrong one. Now, this one. Oh, it's gone. That's why. I'll think about it while I'm thinking about it. While I'm talking about something else, it'll come to me. So we've got Multivista effectively taking the overall stuff and photos and some.
Are they doing internal as well?
And then they're doing internal stuff, which is the bit like what you do, really, sort of internal photos, plotting it and the data in the background. Where what we're using is, we as an organisation are trying to go to Asset Pro internally for all assets, nothing to do with fire safety really, just about when the kitchen's due next and when the bathroom's due a new replacement, that sort of asset replacement for just general repairs and maintenance. So then we're doing our own door surveys, and we've got Turner and Townsend doing our FRAs. So the idea is all that information will partly feed into Asset Pro, and then we'll feed out of that into sort of the BIM modelling again, possibly, or directly, or both at the same time. We're working out how we're going to do that. But that's sort of the plan. It does look, it's going to be. We did look at a couple of people. We looked at a Twinned It as well. As a possibility. We're not using them, but to get that information. It's quite interesting seeing all the different bits of kit. And within Multivista they use CADline. That's the people I'm thinking of. CADline.
Oh yeah.
And so they're very good at the the scanning and the modeling and the plans and the data. So sort of CADline are our data and photos side of things, really. working with multi-vista with data.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, it'd be interesting how that works in practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. So the other thing, obviously, from a construction point of view, one of the things that came out from our working groups the other day. Let me just show you this. Change control.
Right.
Which, as a landlord, this may not affect you too much.
Well, it might be, because my development team, which is one person, she came to me and said, "Oh, we might be either planning what we build next, or we might be buying in a building." And I said, "Well, it depends what stage it's at as to how much, but yes, we might be getting new stuff in, or partly built or something. So yes, it might be involved. We don't know quite yet."
Yeah. So this was given us by one of the team members from Bouygues, and this was done. This particular slide was produced by the NHBC, but it was their interpretation from lots of conversations with the regulator. So this is what they're expecting to come out in the secondary legislation, I think.
Right.
So one of the important things here is that, what is a major change?
Yeah.
And the principle that they're trying to work to here is that the decision for all of these critical assets like smoke dampers and smoke ventilation and also fire doors and the like, and the things that impact on compartmentation. Those decisions have got to be taken before construction starts.
Yes.
Which is a massive
Indeed.
change.
Well, yes, it's exactly, because when Tina, our development manager, said, can I feed into some information for her? And also I'm doing a building safety manager's degree course with the CIOB.
Oh, right. Okay.
Diploma course, and it sort of came up as part of one of the questions, which was very much so. So the decision making, yes, has to be done much earlier. One, because it needs to, and two, it makes sense, because the argument is where things have gone wrong in the past, compromises have to have been made, because certain things can't be reversed once you've gone past a certain point.
Yeah.
It's very hard to say that's the wrong wall you've built all the way up the building. Can you change it?
No, exactly.
It's the wrong type of wall. I can't put my kit in that. So tell you what, I'll put this bit of kit in, which isn't exactly what you need, but that's the best I can do. And you get all these compromises, don't you? Whereas if you did it at the very beginning, and said, well, can you build it this wall instead of that wall, because it would then suit my products, then happy days. And it doesn't really cost any more when you build it, which type of wall you put in. It's probably costs the same, but at least you got the right one in for the right products, and etc. etc. Yeah, so doing everything a lot earlier in theory, in the planning stage, is the biggest thing, isn't it? And you should then have less need for a change control, if everyone's in the room at the beginning, isn't it? That's the thing, I think, getting everyone in the room in the beginning. And when someone says, oh, what we're going to do is save a couple of quid, we're going to change this for that, and everyone goes, no, don't do that, because it affects this, that, and the other.
Yes.
Whereas what's happened in the past is someone's changed it, and then the bloke's been told to turn up to do his thing, and he goes, what the heck's this? This is not what I thought I was going to walk into.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the difficulty with that is contractor design portion, which is the way the M&E tends to be procured is
Yeah.
that's the challenge, really.
Yeah, yeah. So many. I mean, I was in my previous role. We had quite a few at Estuary Housing. We were building quite a lot of buildings, and I was coming along, when they were about 3/4 done or whatever, and having a look at it. And so many times, what the heck's this? Well,
Yeah.
my mate says he needed it. Why? Who's the designer? What is this? Why is it there? Why does it contradict that?
Yeah.
You got a sign there saying stay put, and you got an alarm saying leave.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I don't get it. Well, you've asked, and that's the other thing. The ERs from the employers requirements said you needed a fire alarm, so
Yeah.
we fitted one. Yeah, but who's the designer? Well, you are, because you said you needed a fire alarm. Well, we didn't actually say we need a fire alarm. We said you need to put in whatever needed.
Yes.
But we've put it in because you asked for it. Well, we didn't really ask for it. Who's the designer? And nobody knows, but someone's put it in because someone said that they needed it. And it's,
Yeah.
oh God, what is this? What a mess. And I
Absolutely.
think the biggest thing on that for us all is the competency side of things. Who's competent, who's the right person, have they got the qualifications, experience and knowledge to design it and put it in. At the end of a meeting, who's saying yes, we all agree.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important. I've had meetings with fire alarm people to ask them what they want, and they're sort of saying, well, it depends what you want.
Yeah.
And at the end you sort of end up going, well, am I allowed to do it? Is it the best way? Can I? Well, you can if you want, but we'll have to sign this bit of paper. And again, it's like, who is the designer here? Please, someone's going to sign at the bottom line saying they are responsible for it, and please. Yeah.
Well, that's really the point that Paul McSolly's been making.
Right.
That the one of the challenges is that the designers that are selecting products, they need to be properly informed by all of the complexity of the different things that could impact on whether that
Right.
that damper is going to work.
Yeah.
And it is very complicated. There's a whole decision tree that needs to be built up for each of the asset types. Now,
Yeah.
the frustration I've got is that although that the subject matter experts are saying that that's what needs to be done, because otherwise that damper just won't work properly when it's called upon. But
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any appetite in the industry for who's going to do that. Oh, we've been doing this for the last 3 years, sort of pro bono, to get that knowledge brought together. But the challenge that we've got is then how do we then get that implemented if people are dropping back to something that is, if you like, back to just, well, give me a certificate and transfer the risk.
Yes.
What's the situation with an accountable person? Who would the accountable person be for your buildings? Would that be a director within
Well,
Tower
yeah,
Hamlets?
the advice is accountable persons don't have to be a person.
Oh, really? Oh, is that right?
So legally person just means entity. So
I thought it had to be a named person.
No.
That was
Partly
the case, wasn't it?
It was, but yeah, persons, it's for, just legally persons just means, someone you can point at. But to us, legally, we've then said, and it also means it allows for change. So if you have your staff changing, you don't have to keep telling everyone that people's changed, or even job titles. So technically, Tower Hamlets Community Housing is the accountable person. However, the accountable person would, in practice, be our CEO, because you can't take a company to court, but you can take the CEO who's responsible for this. And then within the accountable person, they are required to delegate down, because if they don't delegate down, it's them. So they delegate it down to people like me to make sure, and my directors around me, that they get the job done. And in fact, I had that thought process a few months ago, probably a year ago now, when my health and safety advisor was rewriting the health and safety policy. And I said, you know what we need to put in there now is about responsibilities, because it was part of the health and safety policy was about responsibilities. And I said, under safety and things like that, I think we might as well put it in something central like the health and safety policy, but it needs also to sit in other places, which says, so that CEOs realizing what they're signing up to do. Because I've had this, right? CEO decides one day they don't need a building safety manager. And they can get Fred to do that instead. Yeah. And they've done it with other jobs. You know, oh, we don't need you. You can, I'll give it to them. What they haven't realized is that person had the delegated legal responsibility, that if it all went wrong, he'd be the bloke in court. And they sack him. And they oh, you can do that and you can do this bit. And it was one of the arguments I've had about the difference between a named building safety manager, for instance, and the building safety manager being a corporate idea. If the people above don't realize they've got rid of that person who was going to carry the can, then it will come back up to them. And if they have no technical knowledge, they are in the wrong place. They shouldn't even be trying to do it, because they don't have it either. And it's about that competency thing. So it's very important that within an organization, that although you name THCH as the overall, that the delegation down is to a named person, because you need to have someone who is responsible further down. So you can have a responsible person and an accountable person. So yeah.
I was told that the term responsible person had been sort of removed.
There's two. Let me just look it up, because funnily enough, I had an email about it where one of my colleagues in another organisation who has some of their properties in our properties, they sort of sublet some of our properties, and I have to answer them for the same question. No, what we've got is accountable person. I think it's this way around: accountable person under the Building Safety Act, but responsible person under the Fire Safety Order.
Safety, exactly.
But they're actually the same person. They just, under the legislation, they've got different names. And then you've got, under the Building Safety Act, you can go down one. What's it called?
You've got a principal accountable person, haven't you?
Principal accountable person, if you've got two, yes. If you've got, so for instance, yes, where we sublet half a building out, we'll be the principal accountable person, and the housing association that's taken half our flats, they'll be the one of the accountable people. That's if you've got those things around. Yeah. No, the one that's really dropped out is the building safety manager.
Yes,
that role has got. So the role still needs to be done, but the job title doesn't have to be building safety manager.
So if the accountable person is delegated down to you responsibility for that, and therefore that's a legal, as you say, you could end up, if things go badly wrong, you could end up being held responsible. If that's the case, then when somebody is then, let's say for example you move on, or you move roles or whatever, the person that's coming in to take on that role, that person would be taking on that legal responsibility also.
Yeah.
Now,
But in yeah, and then in practice, I've got a team. So I've got my director.
yeah,
Well, I had a manager. It was me, my manager, who was in charge of sort of fire safety, capital works overall. So he's a head of
yeah,
department. So department head is me, department head above me, and then our director for that for property services.
yeah,
and then at the same time we're employing Altair.
yeah.
So I would say between us all, we've got responsibility to making sure it all happens. Now, legally, if someone challenged who is it the person where the buck actually stops, I would try and push it back up to Anna, my director, overall, and the board, perhaps. And then legally, they probably push it down to me saying, but you're the technical person who advises us because they're non-technical.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, I'm getting advice from my own knowledge, but also from Altair. And as much as possible, we all sort of sit in the room and go, is everyone happy with it? Because that's the only way to do it, isn't it? No one person can go, I'm an expert on this, you know. As you say, it's a bit like the, you know, the bloke who's saying, you know, like Paul saying about putting the right damper in the right wall.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about one decision, it's that bigger picture.
Well, actually, the accountability that the government was trying to achieve with this is probably not really there.
No, because they've decided that. But I mean, I suppose the roles of the building safety, and I think the reason they took the role of building safety manager out and it got pushed out was because you're going to get some tiny organisations who don't need or want
A building
to
safety
employ
manager.
person one
Yeah.
called a building safety manager. It's like my Fred, who's the head of property services, you know, we've only got one tower block.
Yeah.
He's fine being the building safety manager within his role. And I think they should have kept it, but called it a role, not necessarily a job title.
Yeah, exactly.
So who does that role? Not necessarily who has that job title. And then other larger organisations, L&Q, for instance, you know, they're going to have building safety manager over there, and they may have a different role. So they may have, if you like, equivalent to deputy building safety managers.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, they are, you know, upskilled caretakers, for instance.
Yes.
They've upskilled them. They look after those buildings. They keep an eye on what's happening in their building. And then you have senior building safety managers who look after a group, and then probably a head of building safety manager who looks after everything in total, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, then it becomes a whole team of building safety manager systems, and in other ones, it's a quarter of a person. So I suppose that's probably why they say we can't give it one name, because
sure,
it's horses for courses on the size of buildings. But yeah, that's
good. Okay. Well, that's been very helpful for me. I think the thing is, it's a matter really of drawing everything together and making it simple to navigate, isn't it? You know, to some extent, the processes, the updating processes, and things like that are really, I think, vital.
Yeah, and for me, that's why it's important that I'm in my role, because I don't tell anyone, but I don't do a lot.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I don't
coordinate.
have a budget. I don't really have a budget. I do, but I spend other people's budgets. But I don't get given, this is your project. This is your project. I do have lots of projects. And you know, my projects are mainly communications and gathering stuff. But the biggest project, the biggest job I've got is that overview. I'm not head in the sand working on a project so much. I don't know everything else going on. So one minute I'm talking to the FRA guys about the, you know, has that broken window got fixed or whatever, you know, the glazing in that fire door been done, you know, and all those hundreds and hundreds of FRA items. And at the same time, I'm talking to the plan guys who are rebuilding a building.
Yes.
But I'm the only one in our organisation that knows about all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because as you say, one thing affects something else, and someone's going, "Oh, we're just going to do that." Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, no, 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 no! Don't you realise if you change
Yeah.
that, it's going to bugger up this?
Yeah,
And that's the
asbestos is a
important point.
classic. Yeah, asbestos is a classic example of that, isn't it? You know, you're often the only people that know that are people that know the building quite well.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's a good point, actually. You say someone goes, "Oh, we'll take that bit of asbestos out, be much better out." But if it's doing a fire safety job,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, and someone, I'll put a bit of plywood in. No,
Yeah,
it needs to be a fireboard. You know, you can't just swap it for. And other times it doesn't need to be. It's not a fire.
So in
It's
terms
just a
of
board, you know, and a piece of plywood would be fine, you know.
so who does your maintenance? Have you got your own maintenance
So we have
team?
Axis. We use Axis Europe for maintenance and general repairs, you know, day-to-day repairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they presumably use their own software to capture that, and then feed it back into Asset Pro.
Yeah, that's, I mean, mostly, yeah, we just raise, mostly at the moment, we raise orders on our system, which gets sent to Axis. Axis then comes in and it closes the job off.
Does the work, yeah.
And we pretty much in our own system say, "Oh, that job's done." And we can dig in a bit if we want to check that it was properly done, not just closed as not done. You know, or they went to do A and they actually did B instead. You know, doing, and so that's one of our bits I'm getting from our repair system and or Axis's info and feeding it properly into Asset Pro so that you do get the results of jobs done properly fed back in, not just what we asked for. Because what you ask for and what you get. Because sometimes you don't know, you know, the tenant phones up and says, "I've got a leak." That's all you know, until they've done the job, you won't know what to record. So yeah, getting the feedback in is quite important. But I think the biggest thing overall for me, because I've had to learn it, you know, that thing Paul said about dampers, completely new to me relatively. I thought, I think I said at the meeting, I thought I knew quite a lot, and clearly I know nothing. You know?
That's it.
But you know, and I'm doing it at that level. But people who have very little connection with that have to have a much better understanding of, before you change things, you need to understand how it might affect the building.
Yeah,
we're looking at the build. The biggest thing is the building as a system.
Yeah,
and changing components within that whole system is can mess up the system. So that's the overall thing, isn't it? The building is not seen as a bunch of components, which it used to be, didn't it? You know, fire alarm's a fire alarm, and the doors are the doors, and you know, you don't need to talk about the two together. And that's one of the things you said today, wasn't it, about fire alarm panel zoning and also, you know, compartment zoning. Actually, you know, it's one system. You know,
exactly.
if we change one bit, there was a classic. Someone did a little clip the other day of someone saying, "Have you got this problem?" And it was a bloke, you know, obviously.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Trying to pull a door open because the suction and the AOV was sucking the door shut.
It was very good, that, wasn't it?
Yeah. Actually, it's a very good point. I've had exactly that. Just had a quote in for a front door for the, well, it's going to be locked anyway, for the front door of a block, the ground floor front door, to go from opening inwards to opening outwards. And I think the idea is, you know, if you've got a number of people, it should open outwards. And I think possibly the other idea, it's over 60. If you've got a number of people going out, it should open outwards. And also, I think it's about security. You can't bash a door in. If it opens outwards, you have to pull it, which makes it still more secure. But I've just thought, if that door is almost designed to open to suck air in to allow the air to go up and out.
Yeah.
And it's now going to open outwards, it's going to be sucked shut.
Yeah.
And
so true.
It won't open to allow the air up and in. How is the air going to come into the building if it's not going to come through a blowing open front door? There you go. There's one real example that I've got to think of today and say, actually, is it going to affect the building? Yeah. That's intriguing, isn't it? So if someone's making a change, which sounds like a good idea, and until you think of all the
knock-on effect,
I don't think there's any other air vents. Oh yeah, there was an interesting one. Yeah, building as a system. Change one thing, it changes something else.
That's a
Yeah,
really
so
good
under
example.
the new gateway idea is we should go back to the original designer and say, is that front door, was it built to open inwards to allow the AOV to work?
Yeah.
And if it does, and we change it to outwards, does it affect the AOV? Or is it immaterial because there's a vent somewhere else that actually does that job and the front door's irrelevant? You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. But that's the change process that you've just shown up which would happen as we go through gateways. Someone
Yes.
says, oh, we're going to do this because you know, the bloke from Secure by Design reckons you have a more secure door if you open it outwards. But the AOV bloke goes, whoa, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
That's my air inlet valve, effectively.
Yeah.
You know, you've just blocked off my air inlet valve. And if you don't want to have the door opening inwards, we're going to have to knock a huge hole in the wall here to let the air in some other route. You know,
Sure.
it's all that sort of stuff, isn't it? And you don't want to wait till there's a real fire to find out, oh, that's why it opens inwards. Oh, yeah, it's too late now, isn't it? But yeah, I'm finding things are so much more interlinked than you might know. And of course, other staff who are not as involved haven't even got it on their radar that it might affect something else.
Yeah.
It's quite a big learning process. But there we go. We've had a very long chat.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed it as well. Good.
Yeah,
I hope you found it useful.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, I'll speak to you next time.
All right then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, Richard. Bye-bye.